So, even though it may be difficult because this is a cultural work that has dominated the world
Yes.
for a very long time, do you remember seeing it for the first time, getting into it, being introduced to it, any of that stuff?
Yes. So I did not have cable growing up. And so I grew up in Ohio, Cleveland. And so I, would watch, whatever's on TV, like Martin, Ellie McBeal, Melrose Place, like all these shows. And I went to Pratt Institute for college. And it's my freshman year. So this was 2002. So Sex and the City already been on, I think was on its fourth season. And I had like HBO for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is so cool!" Like people like would talk about HBO in high school, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I finally have it!" And so I had was like channel surfing, and I landed on I think HBO one day when I just was like, I think for me, I was just sort of like, "Oh, New York is kind of a hard place." Like I just didn't expect it to be as hard to sort of like adjust to, and like make friends, and like all this stuff, and so I stumbled on, I want to say it was a season 4 episode because it was like Aiden looked good and he had the short hair. And I was like, oh, what's this shit? I literally had not heard about Sex and the City. So when I heard about HBO, but it was like Sopranos and like The Wire. So like those were that was like what sort of my reference was when it came to HBO. So I like had no idea what Sex and the City was. I knew who Sarah Jessica Parker was because, I watched movies she was in, like LA Story and stuff. But I had no idea what Sex and the City was. And so I just like started watching this episode, season 4. And I was like, oh, this is so funny. And I was like, and I love romantic comedies. I'm such a romantic comedy whore. So I was just like, oh, this is just like, I want New York to be like this. Like, this is like the dream. And so I watched, I think it showed like 2 episodes from season 4. And I was like, oh, this show's really cool. But, this isn't like the TV that we grow up in now. It's like, okay, I have to see when this show will air again. Like, I can't just immediately go like binge it. So I was like, okay, it's like a cool show. And so like I went, about like my college life, going to classes, doing improv, hanging out with friends. And then I caught it again on HBO, and it was like season 3, like literally like middle of like when she was cheating on Aiden. So I was like, it was like so out of order. I didn't like know what was going on, but it was like the episode where they're going to Charlotte's wedding, and she told him that she cheated. And they had the big breakup outside the church. And I was like fully in tears, just being like, okay, I don't know everything that's going on, but I was like, this acting is so good. And I was so heartbroken. And I was like, I'm so obsessed with this show. And so they started like re-airing it. So then I was able to sort of like go back from the beginning and watch it. And like, that is how I fell in love with the show. So my entry was Aiden and not Big. So that's like that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think we had pretty similar experiences. Like, I grew up in the Midwest. I did not have cable when I was growing up. I can remember like hearing about my friends having HBO and being like, you mean they have movies on TV and they keep the swearing in? But yeah, and like I didn't really watch it until like towards the end of when it was showing. I think the 5th season was on air, and my ex-boyfriend was super, super obsessed with it. So we watched all of the DVDs and kind of
Yes.
But it's funny thinking about the impact that show, I mean, I guess, it's a lot of different things, but the way that it affected HBO, that it was one of the first times that they had, it was the start of their original programming really being something that people cared about. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like the Sopranos definitely at that time, but this, I think they were on at the same time. So it was like prestige shows, but on opposite ends of the spectrum. But yeah, just incredible amounts of story packed into each season, incredible characters, like having these kind of archetypes of women that, everyone obviously is like, well, I'm a Samantha or whatever. Like not like stock characters. They still feel like real people. Um, and like you said, just living this life in New York that felt like, in some ways it's a fantasy. Like, I live in New York. It is, as you said, a tough city. It really
Yeah.
kicks your ass, especially the first couple of years you live here. But having that, as someone who didn't live in New York at the time, this like, idealized, glamorized version of what it was like to live here was just so exciting.
Yeah. And it was just like, I remember when I was like, okay, I really like this show. So I went to, this is how old I am. I went to Virgin Megastore. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I would buy the DVDs, and then me and my girlfriends would just like, we get like junk food from like, we used to go to, so we lived near Associated Supermarket, which is like the very bottom of the run kind of supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And we would just get like chips and salsa and popcorn and like just cookies and whatever. And we would sit and we would just like watch from the beginning. And like, I just so fell in love with this show that really just sort of like, I mean, like most comedies, not everything holds up, but I think the heart of it being like, just like how important like your friendships are, and like those moments where you can sort of feel lost without them, and sort of these dating situations that happen where you're just like, oh, that was weird, and you like sort of talk about it with your friends, like all that stuff was just very so much true to life, that it really just felt very a part of my life, and also helped sort of shaped, I think, in a certain ways, like sort of like what I want out of like my friendships, and what I want out of New York, and what I want out of a relationship. Like I'm still in the hunt for like my Aiden, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was so formative for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think showing those relationships between women in a way that was like sex positive. There's something about it being on HBO as well that it felt more authentic, because you could swear, because it was like the way that people really talk to their friends, instead of having like Friends or something where, it's a version of friendships, but it's very confined to what network TV allows. So just having like the ability to show what women in their 30s and 40s do in New York, and going out and making mistakes and being messy and having fun and supporting each other and whatever, all those things. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and what I also love about it is I think like everyone when they grow up, you sort of like watching TV shows about people older than you, so you can be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like is this what life is going to be like? And like, the episode where Charlotte has the miscarriage, which is like so sad, and obviously I'm at an age where like none of my friends were going through that, but it just gave me insight into a world of like, oh, this is like a devastating thing, and this is how you can show up for your friends. And so like now I'm of an age, I'm almost 40, I just turned 39. That's a thing that is happening. Not like super common, but it's happening more often than it's not. And so how to be there for your friends, and how to just like listen and just be physically present, and just like hug them if you want, or if they want, or like if they want to talk about something else, just be able to like be that fun distraction for them. So there's all those things that I really like about Sex and City, in terms of like just feeling like, oh, this is like a little bit of a playbook, even though, like you said, it is fantasy in a lot of ways, but it's a little bit of a playbook on how to be a certain kind of adult in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having those two sides of it, that it's like this more grounded side that is talking, feels like it's getting into the relationships that friends have with each other. And then the ludicrous, like, fashion and the kind of hijinks that happen in each episode. Like I don't, just for anybody listening to this, I don't only use Wikipedia to do this. It's, I think it's a good jumping off point. You can look in the sources on Wikipedia and find articles that you can then read yourself as a starting point. Anyway, I digress. In the Wikipedia page, they have descriptions of like what happened in every season, and just like a single sentence. Samantha flirts with a priest, has nude photos taken of herself, tries to have a relationship with a lesbian, and sleeps with a baby talker, a wrestling coach, and a farmer. And that to me is just like a perfect encapsulation. And that's like one character's arc through one season.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And it's nonstop. And that's what, it's balancing like the real kind of emotional stuff with this like heightened like fantasy version of being in New York and having like amazing, outrageous experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so like those two things, the balance of those two things, I think is what makes it great and what kind of kept me coming back.
Absolutely. And just sort of the balance of to juggle four different storylines. It's sort of like what Seinfeld was able to do when they were just juggle all those storylines and have everything come together neatly or sometimes not neatly narratively. Like it just was not only a testament to just sort of like, oh, I love these characters and blah, 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 but like just the writing on the show alone. And just, I don't know, it just really, I think it's such a special show. And I know that, the movies, they're not great. So here's the thing, like if I ever want to say anything like not super positive about Sex and the City, I feel like I have to whisper because SJP is all around us. She is like the goddess of New York, but like the movies and just like that aren't that great. But I feel like Sex and the City really was such a perfect show in terms of like sometimes there were like flaws that I think make it interesting because it feels like more real rather than like, these shows where like everything is tied together perfectly and you're like, oh yeah, that was like really cool. But I don't know, life is not tied together perfectly. So I kind of like, sometimes the episode, like remember at the beginning of the series where like, Carrie would break the fourth wall and talk to camera and like do those like cutaways to like random guys playing like basketball who truly looks like 38 and they were supposed to be like 22. I'm so glad like that messiness was there and they immediately were like, oh yeah, this isn't good. Like we're going to cut that out. Like I just love seeing sort of the evolution of the show, sort of like the creative choices they made and the risks they took, I thought were just really, really fascinating. It's just so good for like what they were able to do at that time. Like it is truly groundbreaking in a way that I don't think it gets quite the respect that, maybe like a Sopranos or The Wire or even 6 Feet Under gets, you know what I mean? But I'm just like, this show is like on par with like a Golden Girls in terms of like, you can see its DNA and so many other shows that came after it. And so I just really, I just wanted to say that like to me, it should be considered hotly, just like the way those other shows are.
Yeah, and I read some stuff that people were saying, oh, well, it's just because The Sopranos was like a drama and that's hard hitting and that's, people take that more seriously. But like even compared to Curb Your Enthusiasm, I don't think it gets treated as respectfully. And, sexism obviously plays a part in that. And it's this idea that shows about women, shows that have like fashion as a focus or that are, have silly moments or are, overtly sexual or whatever, can't be taken as seriously as something about the mafia or, about Larry David's sex life. So
Yeah. And it's just when I think about the show, it's like you think about these things like, okay, sure, maybe on the surface, fashion is frivolous if you want. But I'm like, fashion, if it were frivolous, I don't think it would be such a, billion-dollar business. I don't think there would be the gatekeepers that exist in that world that where it drives like, how women view their bodies, what it says about status, what it says about class, what it says about self-esteem. Everyone in some ways uses the way that they dress to sort of like symbolize something about themselves. Like even if you are, like I'm gonna bring up like Louis C.K. like just for a second because he would tour in like the black t-shirt and jeans and he was like, it's just like I'm an everyman sort of like person. Like that's what that outfit was supposed to convey to people. I'm like, that says a lot because every man, every woman sort of persona is like, I am you, you are me, we are related, we are connected. you could see yourself in me. And like that says a lot about someone's personality when that's what you want to represent. So to me, I'm like, on certain level, yes, can fashion be frivolous? Like sometimes some of the things that Balenciaga in particular puts out, I'm like, you're trolling us. Some of these things are ridiculous. But it really drives and shifts culture, and it can create movements, whether it's like, civil rights movement where everyone was dressed up really nicely to sort of like represent, or what Dapper Dan did with designer luxury labels and like flipped it and made it like really cool and current and palpable in the Black community. So for me, I'm like, the fashion piece of it, I think is so important and really drove so much of what happened in fashion outside of the show. So I'm like, it's important because of that. B, everyone wants love. Like, to pretend like that's a frivolous thing when that's like why we're why we're all here. And you can see how some people either are scared of love or want it so desperately, or struggle to hang on to it. So I'm like, to me, there's nothing universal than the pursuit of platonic and romantic friendships. So I always just am like, I just struggle with the fact that people consider that frivolous. Just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And like, definitely friendships and relationships, everybody has them, and everybody should be able to relate to, having good friends and relying on them, or not getting along with them and having romantic relationships that are fraught and successful and wonderful and terrible. But that fashion piece, it's like everybody wears clothes. I mean, it's a little like Devil Wears Prada thing going on here. It's like, you think you can just that you wear this color and whatever. That's like these decisions are being made by lots of people who know everything about the world of fashion and blah blah blah. So there's like, I can understand an element of feeling like it's all commercial and it's all just people like on high making decisions about what everybody wears. But you choose what your clothes are, and it's not a reflection of your entire personality, but it gives people an idea of your taste. It gives people an idea of how you want to carry yourself in the world and all of that kind of stuff. But even the high fashion stuff that, the stuff that Carrie wears constantly, that is like, give me a break. Nobody just walking down the street has like, a gigantic feather coming out of the middle of their forehead or whatever. But it works for the character because it is like an expression of who she is and what she cares about. And all of that stuff, even Balenciaga ridiculousness, is art. Like that, to me, the runway stuff, you don't expect people to wear that stuff on the street. And it's just like this incredible creative expression. So yes, let's defend the fashion element. But also then what you were talking about kind of the legacy of it and the complications posed by the later works. I mean, have you watched And Just Like That all the way through?
Oh, yes. Here's the thing, like for me, Sex in the City is canon. So I will literally watch anything in the multiverse. And I do not know what the hell is going on.
I don't think it's
It's just, as a Black person, I never watched Sex and the City and was sort of like felt left out. Like I just didn't. And I'm not saying that has to be a universal reaction, but I think this hyper correction that they're doing and Just Like That, where I feel like, well, you just gave each white person, a person of color or a person from the queer community as their sort of like Sherpa to like teach them things. I'm like, that is more patronizing. Like I am like, Charlotte would not have Black friends. Like she just wouldn't. And that's fine. Like, I'm not like, what? I'm like, yeah, she's not going to have Black friends. So it just feels very sort of like trying to like correct something that's sort of, to me, I'm just like, well, we should just have more shows of people of color, people from the queer community that are like this, as opposed to sort of like wedging them into this narrative. Because what I think is the biggest flaw about And Just Like That is that Carrie, Miranda, and Charlotte aren't as together.
Mm.
Like it's, you know what I mean? Like they'll each episode, I think they'll have like a dinner together, but it doesn't feel like they're truly like friends in each other's worlds and deeply like immersed in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like such a disconnect to have them like not this trio. Oh, so sad that Samantha's not in it, but I think Kim was right in that fight. But to have the trio separated and then bring in these other characters that like no one really cares about, it's sort of like you've lost the friendship element of the show, which to me was the foundational aspect of it, and something that like I return to. Like I feel like I watched Sex and the City probably all the way through every other year, and I always like learn something different and like feel different things. And like when I first started watching it, I was like, Big is like garbage. It's like always Aiden. And now for me, it's like more complicated. And when I was younger, I didn't really care for the Russian that much. And now that I'm older, I'm like, no, the Russian was like actually kind of a good character until they made him terrible so that Big could come back into the scene. And so I just feel like we're losing all of those sort of like iconic moments because these are friends who care so much about each other and invest in each other's lives that now it just feels like, I don't know if Charlotte cares about Miranda and Che. Like it just feels like, why are there all these people here? Like that last dinner at Carrie's house, I was like, we have the chick who like designed that one dress is invited to this dinner. It made no sense. I was like, it should be the three girls.
Right.
Sorry to invent.
No, I mean, I agree with all that stuff. And it's like, to me, the way that those friendships have shifted so it's like they forgot that they know each other or something. And they all need this new person who is, their guide through this complicated new world where Black people exist. And oh my God, everyone's a they, them. It's so heavy-handed. It's like you feel like it kind of comes from a good place, that they're trying to respond to criticism, but you can have new characters who are more representative of the population of New York as a whole without it being so clunky and heavy-handed and just like it is so cringeworthy. And it's that, but it's also these characters like not being true to the Sex and the City versions of who they were, like Miranda being like, oh my God, I just get nervous around Black people. I don't know what to do. I keep messing up. And then, Carrie, who like the show is called Sex and the City, and it was based on her writing about her sex life. And she's like, I can't say vagina on a podcast. It's really bizarre. And, I don't know. There's lots of great people in the writer's room. And I don't know if it's like Michael Patrick King overseeing all this stuff. There are some turns of phrase as well that feel very much like a person who is not really in touch, does not really have the finger on the pulse of New York City anymore. Like Che's comedy concert. It's like that. Yeah. What? We need that phrase. Nobody says that.
Nobody says that. And it's just like, even even the way they dealt with the women aging in the first season, even like with Steve now has like a hearing aid, Carrie needs hip surgery, like everyone's falling apart because they're 50. And I was like, I know so many people in their 50s who are like, they're doing great. Mm-hmm. Like they're fine, they're active, they work out, they travel, they have fun, they have like, and so it just felt so like, not that there needs to be, I feel like they took a lot of the fantasy element out of the show and trying to like ground it in reality, but it just felt like, I think it was an overcorrection. I think you can have some sort of like aging stuff for sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like I liked in the second movie when Samantha was going through menopause and had all her creams. Like I felt they dealt with that in a funny way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But this just felt so like, where are the laughs? Like you really feel the lack of Samantha and the laughs without her there. But just overall, it just feels like, and it just made it seem like aging was such a like, just not like exciting or like fun. And I remember like watching Golden Girls and being like, oh, being old will be like lit. You know what I mean? Like it'll be like so fun. You'll be like your girlfriends and like talking and like, it's just like that. The way they just are dealing with it. Like, sure, there are complications with it, of course, but they just made it kind of sad a little bit in a way that I just am like, this is not a show that needs to fully abandon fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, I think we have like enough shows that are so deeply rooted in reality. And I think one of the magical parts of Sex and the City was that there was this air of like, you know, magic dust over everything. And I feel like they got rid of that. And I don't think that was the right choice.
Yeah. And I feel like in the kind of back half of the second season, there were little elements of that kind of drifting back in. I mean, Miranda calling Charlotte a cum slut. Like, I was like, here we go.
Yeah. I was like, that was funny. Yeah.
And there's some stuff about the relationships, even with the new people, that felt more real. Like, what is Carrie's POC tour guide's name?
The real estate agent, I forget her name. Yeah.
When they're like supposed to go to the Hamptons, and then Carrie's like wanting to invite Aiden or whatever, and that whole thing where she's just like, look, this is gross, I don't like this. And the kind of interaction between the two of them when she was saying like, this isn't a good idea anymore and I need to kind of be away from you, that felt a little bit more real to me. And there are moments in and just like that feel a little bit better, but on the whole, yeah, it doesn't feel great and it doesn't feel necessary.
Yeah. And I think for me, going back to Sex and the City, like one of the things that I did really like was when they would have their disagreements, like when Carrie walked in on Samantha going down the Worldwide Express guy, or you know, Miranda's, you know, telling the girls at brunch that she's pregnant, and that sets Charlotte off because Miranda's like, oh, I think I might just get an abortion. And so those like moments like are so real. And like you have those moments of disagreement with your friends where you're just like, I am not seeing eye to eye with you on this situation. And, or like when Charlotte called Carrie out for her affair with Big, and Carrie was like, oh, I'm worried about, you know, just the whole thing. And Charlotte's like, no, you're just worried about what's going to happen to you. Like, you don't care about Natasha. And I was like, that is such a good friendship moment. And like, that to me is just sort of like how they move through that. And like, they still all remain friends, even when they didn't agree with their friends' choices. I was like, that's so great, especially in a time where everything is so combative right now and everyone wants to be right. And there's a wrong person in an argument. And if you do like one wrong thing, then like, I'm getting rid of you. I'm like, this is a show that celebrates sort of like, no, your friend's going to do things. You're going to do things. And guess what? You're still going to be friends. You just got to work through it. Right. And I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that always struck me, especially in later seasons, is that Carrie's kind of a selfish like a lot of the time. And she does things that are for her, like, you know, she'll interrupt people when they're talking about some like really upsetting moment in their life and just be like, oh my God, I can't believe that I can't find my purse. And, those moments where it's just, and people call her on her shit, and then other people have problems too. And they have moments where there's like tension in their relationships because that's real. That's what friendship is. Yeah, I guess to bring the concept of the show into.
Oh, sorry. I just been.
Do you know how much of a pleasure this has been? And this is exactly what the show always is. It's just rambling. When it's at its best, when there's a subject that I'm like, oh, here we go, and that's exactly what this is. So this is gold. Anyway, just thinking about like your relationship with this show and the kind of the effect that it's had on you. Do you think, outside of it just being, something that you really love and that you want to watch over and over again, do you feel its influence on you at all in many ways, I'm sure, but you tell me.
Absolutely. In so many ways, the fashion element, and this is not to shade the Midwest, but when you're growing up in Ohio, it's like the fashion in like New York, LA, Paris, Milan is different than in Cleveland. So I was, not the coolest dresser, I will say. I used to, when I moved here, I had these pair of Steve Madden cowboy boots that I thought were just so fire. And through the show, I learned how to self-expression through fashion. I fell in love with fashion, and I love fashion so much now, and I really do use it to show off like my personality. Like one day I'm feeling like a little more butch, one day I want to be sexy, that kind of like surface level stuff. And then I sort of think, I think for me, because I am such a romantic and I am such a person who like believes in love and sort of just the magic that can happen in life, I think that's definitely sort of made me kind of think about what I will and won't accept in a relationship. And, certainly when I was younger, I think there was a little bit of like, you kind of shape yourself a little bit to the person you're dating because you're like, well, that's, what I should do as a woman. Right.
Mm.
And then, we watch a show like Sex and the City, and Samantha was so intrinsically herself. And so like Smith, you either take it or you leave it. And like, that's how it's going to be. And I think I've now gotten to that place where I'm very much like, this is who I am. Yes, I'm going to work on myself, obviously, but I'm not going to like sort of be shy or demure because that's going to make the guy feel like he is like the top dog. You know what I mean? And so I think from watching the show and seeing these four women, like even with Carrie, when she could be so selfish, but she can also just be so just herself and kind of quirky and like, she's like, I'm going to be the girl with the curly hair and I'm going to do kind of like the random things and I'm going to have the writing job and I'm going to just maybe not be like super financially responsible, like all these things that might look like flaws to other people. Is just sort of like, well, that's kind of what I am. And like, I'm a flawed person. And so I think sort of just embracing that spirit of being flawed, being sex positive, being someone like Miranda, like I identify with her in so many ways in terms of like the responsibility aspect of it, the sort of like, all or nothing kind of rigidity sometimes that I have that I'm trying to undo, which I very much get from my dad. My dad is very much a black or white person. There is no gray for him. And I sort of inherited that. And so now I'm just like, no, there are shades of gray. Like you have to just sort of accept that. And so I think all these women just sort of, they really leaned into like great parts of themselves and not so great parts of themselves. I think I've really learned to do the same as well. And like, I'm lovable regardless of that. And I think that's fully a lot of that comes from Sex and the City, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting actually thinking. I don't know, this seems like a kind of basic thing because all of these women are kind of representations of different kinds of women, but in some ways it's like Inside Out or something, where it's like they're the different emotions and they're all part of who you are, and they, you know, don't just represent different kinds of people, but they represent different facets that each person has. Which is, I think, another one of the shortcomings. I don't want to keep coming back to how trash and just like things, but you know, to me, Samantha was the hot sauce. She's the one who like gives flavor to, you know, she's cuts through the and is just like super outspoken, just, you know, really she had her insecurities too, but just like kind of fully in herself. And when I was looking back through old episodes and stuff, the episode where she meets Brady for the first time and he's crying and she talks about him later and she's like, that baby is an apple. He's like,
it's so good. And it's just so, I think, you know, another thing that I really have taken away from the show, and I think this is more sort of career side than anything else, is just sort of, it's so funny and has equally as much heart. And I feel like, you know, that's probably in stark juxtaposition to like Seinfeld, which was like no feelings, no growth. You know what I mean? Like it was just about the scenarios and these people, but we didn't want anyone learning anything. We didn't want anyone growing or changing. And like they both are phenomenal, but I think because I'm a person where my comedy, there's a lot of heart in it, as well as trying to be super funny. That really resonates with me. And I just think that sort of level of being able to touch someone while also being funny and being vulnerable, I think is just so powerful and necessary. And I think as a society, technology is making us sort of lose a little bit of our vulnerability. Like I feel like we're all like a little tougher, a little more lonely because we're just sort of like interacting with our phones or screens, and we're not like, hey, let me just call my friend and we'll talk for 20 minutes. It's just, I'll just fire off a text while I'm watching Love is Blind and it's kind of boring for a second. You know what I mean? As opposed to just being fully focused. And I had to learn this because like I love my parents, and like whenever we chat on the phone, they will like want to talk for like an hour or 90 minutes. And for the longest time, I was like, why does this phone call need to be so long? I was like, why do we need 90 minutes? And I'm just like, they're connecting. And like, we're so used to just firing off an email or just sort of dipping in and out of conversations that is just like the thought of like having to talk to these people who like brought me into this world for longer than like 30 minutes. I was like, oh my God, the torture. And then I had to be like, oh, I'm losing that ability to be able to have like a sustained conversation with people. And so I think one of the things I really love about Sex and the City is that it everything, I think the dialogue drives like 80% of that show, whether it's just the pops of like the jokes or like the serious moments. It's all about like what people are saying or the subtext of what they're not saying. And so like just remembering to have that level of like connection, and not just with like your besties, but with everyone in your life, just having that level of like patience, presence, connection, I think is so important. I think that's totally like Sex and the City.
I could not have said it better myself. I think that is the perfect way to finish. So much fun. Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to talk about this.
Of course, I could talk about this for like 3 hours straight, no problem.
But really, an utter delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's so great.
Hey, do you want more conversations with incredible people talking about the movies and music they love? Then subscribe to the Spark Parade YouTube channel.